So we have an excellent panel here to deal with access to basic banking services. And Mr. Torsten from the European Caisse d'Epargne, he has filled in for Mr. Olivier at the very last minute. So we're very grateful for that. So we're going to hear something from the cooperatives in the broad sense of the term. So this is our panel. So perhaps I could just present the context. I had planned on 20 minutes for this, but I'll try to whittle things down. But I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do with the slides. Maybe Olivier can help me out here moving on the slides. Oh, okay, so Olivier, if we can move straight on to the definition. So this is a definition which has been quoted in the past. So I'd just like to simplify this a little bit. There are things that aren't absolutely essential. We'll be discussing this later anyway, but mainstream market, I wonder whether that's a particularly good idea referring to that. But there are three important things in this definition. Exclusion from the banking system has for a long time been a matter of access to banking services. And people have asked the question, who has a bank account, who has access to banking services? Now, that's the starting point, but there's more to it than that. You might have access to services, but do you have difficulties in using those services? That's the next question. Some people have a bank account, but they have purely formal access. It doesn't really serve any practical purpose. And you have people who have a bank account, but they have difficulties. They run up costs, and that can cause people problems. So appropriate access is what it's about. That's the third term in this definition. So the characteristics of the products proposed to a person have to correspond to their real needs and their real capacity, their financial capacity. And they have to fulfill the different standards in the countries of the EU. You know, the things that do vary in terms of people's needs for banking services. Sometimes you can't receive your wages or your benefits without a bank account, and from a certain amount you can't pay for things in cash. And in other countries it's the opposite situation. Now, I'm a French national, although I don't live there anymore, but we have a 99% level of access, but the 1% remaining, their situation is nightmarish because they have all sorts of problems as a result of not having access to banking services. Now, you can't really read this slide, but what's important is the colors, really. This is access to bank accounts. So you have the 15 countries of the EU, and in green you have the newer members. In red you have the average for the 15 and the average for the 12. And if you look at the levels of access, well, for Greece, savings accounts weren't taken into account, so the figures are not correct for them. This is an underestimate, but you can see a wide variety in terms of levels of access. Some are up to 100% access, and in Bulgaria, 17%. Olivier, if you could move along now. Now, you have people living below the poverty level, and here the situation is even more deplorable, and there is more ground to be covered. And that goes for countries with, generally speaking, a high access rate. And these are just deposit accounts. we have a 99% access level for deposit accounts in France. And Claude was talking about the legislation in this area. But you have a lot of people who don't have access to banking services. So you have to take these figures with a pinch of salt. And if you want to act at the European level, it's a completely different situation. You've got Bulgaria, Romania on the one hand, and you've got Denmark, Finland, where you have a level of 100%, huge variety, and Sweden, 100% access as well. So, Olivier, if you could go to the next slide. It's not just about selling products to people, it's about corresponding, trying to meet their needs. So you have to identify what those needs are. People need to have an appropriate response to their needs. So this is what basic banking services might look like. This is the basis of the discussions going on in Ireland. They're working on this at the moment. So you need universal access. You need to avoid stigmatization. You need to have simplified identification of procedures, so figuring out people's identities, their address, that can be a problem. And you have the buffer zone, so when you withdraw your money at the counter, you can only draw it out in banknotes. If you've only got €9, then if you have a minimum withdrawal of €10, you're in trouble. And if people keep their money in cash because it's less costly, at least in the short term, well, that's something that needs to be borne in mind. And this morning, up to 10:45, we're going to talk about access to bank accounts. And in some European countries, individuals are withdrawing their money from the bank because they've lost confidence in the banking system. This is another phenomenon. So it's not just about poverty, this. You need to have a holistic approach to this issue. I've tried to come up with a grid to show what the procedures are to encourage banking service providers to bring people who are in a situation of poverty. This is based on a study for the European Commission, and the idea was to put a figure on the cost of this. There are some details that have been left out, and the information was incorrect for some countries, so I had to compensate a bit here. But you have countries like Portugal and Greece where you've got nothing. This is on the basis of 2010. Some countries have moved on since then. You have countries where you have a charter, a voluntary charter, the UK and Italy, with varying degrees of success. You have other countries where you have savings and cooperative banks, and their mainstreaming is a problem, because you can see that you achieve better results in countries where there is no charter, but where you have these kinds of banks. You have countries where there is an obligation imposed on various institutions. You have regional laws in Germany, for example, similar arrangements in Ireland, and you have other countries where you have a global binding requirement, and there you have much higher levels of access, as you could see. Now, if you have a legal obligation, why do you achieve better results? Well, if the banks don't welcome these customers, it's not because they don't want them, it's because this involves costs. So in order to counteract those costs, you need an obligation. So here we have the newer member states, and I can't really explain to you these figures in detail. There isn't much documentation in this area, and I don't really know any Eastern European languages. I'm limited to English in terms of reading up on the situation. And just because you might have legislation in place doesn't mean the best results necessarily, and that's one fact. But you can just see that there is a big difference. And just to conclude, this is the main issue for the purposes of our roundtable discussion. What can we do in order to promote inclusion in the banking system? So there are various possibilities. You don't always achieve the same results depending on the country. And I'd like to hear the opinion of the panelists. What can be done in order to promote inclusion in the banking system, to have better access to banking services? So this was my brief introduction, which was quite long. Sorry about that.